Surprisingly, the Washington Post has burned their source in the Find the Fraud fake news story scandal. And the scandal, my friends, is getting crazier by the day. For those that aren't familiar with what's happening, January 9th, the Washington Post reported that Donald Trump, in a phone call, told a Georgia election official to, quote, find the fraud and, quote, you will be a national hero. It turns out the story was absolutely fake. Their only confirmation, an unnamed source familiar with the call. That was a lie. Not only do we now know that Donald Trump never said these things, we are learning many other news outlets pushed the exact same lie. We're learning the recording may have been illegal in the first place. We are learning the Washington Post never actually spoke with someone who was on the call in the first place. It is a ridiculous game, quite literally, of telephone. This is all about the media's desperate attempt to go after Trump, make him look bad no matter what. And many moderate individuals and disaffected liberals have been pointing out, you don't need to make up quotes from Trump. Why would they do this? As it turns out, the individual named by the Washington Post apparently was told by someone on the call what happened, then told the Washington Post, and the Washington Post said, good enough for us. Many other news outlets claim to have spoken with and independently confirmed this information, speaking with the source, I suppose, none of which was true. Apparently, the recording was discovered in the trash folder after a public document request. The individual is even trying to cover up what had happened. Let's get into this, because this is a very serious media scandal that just keeps getting worse. Now we're hearing from people like Jack Posobiec, for instance, the recording itself may have been a felony because of Florida's two-party consent rule. The American Conservative reports something is rotten in the Georgia Secretary of State's office. My friends, this is a media and political scandal. Political individuals, people working in government, staffers, were seeding fake information to the press, and the press knew it was likely bunk and pushed it anyway. Now, here's where it gets crazy. These outlets, the Washington Post, they are refusing to correct, trying to justify publishing fake news and then saying partisans will absolutely claim we published fake news. You're damn right we will, because you did. Here's the story. They say 2 recordings of conversations between President Trump and officials in the Georgia Secretary of State's office are at issue in a growing controversy. Both played a major role in stoking a narrative about Trump trying to steal the election by throwing out ballots. The first was made on December 23rd, but it was not released until last week in the Wall Street Journal. That recording prompted a mammoth correction from the Washington Post, which in its original story erroneously reported that Trump told investigator Frances Watson to, quote, find the fraud, and that she would be a national hero if she did. The person who gave the erroneous quotes for the December 23rd story has been identified by the Washington Post as Jordan Fuchs. I'm going to pronounce her name that way because I'm worried if I pronounce it the way I think it's pronounced, YouTube will demonetize me because it sounds like a swear word. Deputy Secretary of State of Georgia. She gave an interview to the Post's Eric Wemple on Tuesday, telling him, quote, I believe the story accurately reflected the investigators' interpretation of the call. The only mistake here was in the direct quotes, and they should have been more of a summary. She continued, quote, I think it's pretty absurd for anybody to suggest that the president wasn't urging the investigator to, quote, find the fraud. These are quotes that Watson told me at the time. Let me break that down for you. Deputy Secretary of State of Georgia told the Washington Post, someone told me Donald Trump said this. And the Washington Post said, second party hearsay, third party hearsay, that is good enough for me. The person was not party to the conversation. The person did not overhear the conversation. Someone just told them, hey, here's what happened. And the media, the Washington Post, CNBC, PBS, CNN, etc., they all ran with the lie. And they claimed they confirmed it. That's what's amazing. When the recording was published by the Wall Street Journal, they noted, when the Post first reported on the call, state officials said they did not believe that a recording existed. Officials located the recording on a trash folder on Watson's device while responding to a public records request, according to a person familiar with the situation. who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe the internal process. I don't care. I don't believe that either. We are in no position to believe anybody at this point, but I'll tell you what, the recording exists. We found it. Wonder who that was. As for the original erroneous characterizations given by Fooch, if she was truly concerned about illegal pressure being applied on the phone call, which Watson claims she did not feel she could have gone to law enforcement and preserved the call record. Instead, she went to the Washington Post and the recording was put in the trash. She had a recording, she deleted it or tried to, and then lied to the media. She claims he said this. I know. She had a recording of the call. Somebody lied, and it was her. There you go. Quote, they secretly recorded the telephone call, mischaracterized its contents to the news media, and then attempted to destroy the recording. It is confidence shattering, David Schaefer, chairman of the Georgia Republican Party, told TAC. Fooch's involvement in the December 23rd incident has led many to assume that she was the source of the leaked recording from January 2nd, as well, also published by the Washington Post. Two sources told the American Conservative that this was in fact the case. The only three people on Raffensperger's side of the January 2nd call were Raffensperger himself, General Counsel Ryan Germany, and Fooch's. Fooch also had an existing relationship with one of the Post reporters whose byline was on the story. Quote, she refuses to acknowledge whether she recorded the call on January 2nd. Mark Roundtree, president of Landmark Communications, tells the American Conservative. That's what she's hiding from. A second source who works in Georgia politics also identified Fooch's as the source of the January 2nd recording. She hid from both, but the Washington Post has outed her for the first call. The question now becomes, will they out her in the second call, Roundtree told the American Conservative. Roundtree's firm has employed as VPs both Fooch and Gabriel Sterling, the COO of the Secretary of State's office, who became the face of pushback against the Trump campaign's claims of fraud in Georgia. Roundtree also helped run Brad Raffensperger's campaign for the office in 2018. So these are people who know, people he knows quite well. Fooch allegedly told another former Landmark employee that she was traveling to Florida on January 1st. Florida is a two-party consent state. So if she is the source of the recording and it was recorded there, she may have violated Florida's wiretapping law. She did not respond to questions about her location that day or whether she was the source of the recording, which were left on read for about 12 hours. Gabriel Sterling also did not respond to the same questions. When she worked here, she was obsessed with the Washington Post. You'd walk by her office, and on her monitor was the Washington Post all the time, Roundtree added. She obsesses about the Post, and she feels like people who are not in the Washington Post are not important. She somehow got charmed and obsessed when she worked as an intern in Washington, D.C. for a year. I think she just became enthralled with the idea of dirty politics, going Woodward and Bernstein and Nixon. The Washington Post ran the original story on January 9th, alleging that Trump said find the fraud, and the Georgia investigator Frances Watson would be a national hero if she did. They have since corrected the story to reflect Trump's real words and identified Fooch as the source. The Secretary of State's office could have corrected the record when it was initially reported incorrectly by the Post in the midst of a heated election debate, but they didn't. Numerous other outlets ran with the story based on the same anonymous sourcing. If Fooch was not the source of the leaked recording, that means there is more than one official in the Georgia Secretary of State's office who is leaking in a politicized way. That means the office has bigger problems. I think the bigger problems, my friends, is that the media is refusing to correct the record and admit they were wrong and this story was fabricated. Over at the Washington Post, Eric Wemple writes somewhat critically of the Washington Post action is what's going on. But he basically just says, well, partisans are going to criticize us over this, but they rightly should. They rightly should. Someone from the Washington Post had unconfirmed rumors from this individual, Jordan, at the Secretary of State's office, and decided that was confirmation. What happened to getting confirmation by, actually hearing a recording? What happened to journalists getting confirmation by reaching out to another source and asking, is this true? Doesn't exist anymore. I believe what we are seeing is politically motivated media. You've got this woman in the office, as well as Brad Raffensperger and others in Georgia. They hated Trump. They wanted the scandal. The media absolutely wanted the scandal as well. What happens when you have two witting partners and the media wants a narrative? It'll get them clicks, make them money, and make Trump look bad. And these people also want to make Trump look bad. They'll run it. And then all of these other news outlets did the same thing. What are we supposed to believe when individuals who were not on phone calls or who claimed they weren't then give that information? But later it turns out that they actually had the recording in their trash folder. So which is it? Did they know of the recording? Did they make the recording? And if they did they lie to the press? It would seem so. The Washington Post writes, on January 9th, the Post reported that then President Trump, blah, 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 said find the fraud. In both cases, the quotes were wrong. The Post has acknowledged in a correction to the story, Trump did not tell the investigator to find the fraud. The story landed on top of a tumult with little equal in modern history. Since the November 3rd election, Trump and his allies have attempted to convince his supporters that Joe Biden stole the election. That lie provided the rhetorical impetus for Trump supporters to storm the Capitol in January, just as Congress was taking up Electoral College results. Evidence of Trump's improper actions regarding those results piled up before and after the January 6th Capitol riot. Here's the timeline. On January 2nd, Trump took part in a phone call with Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, pressuring him to find enough votes to overturn his defeat. That was also my understanding to be out of context. The next day, Post reporter Amy Gardner surfaced a recording of that call, but they posted like a 4-minute snippet. Then on January 9th, Gardner broke the now corrected story of Trump's call with Watson, which had taken place on December 23rd. Tracking the phone history of a malfeasant president is a big job. You see how they're doing this? It's not our fault we published literal fake news. Trump was malfeasant. The original phone call, that big story where Trump was like, find the, we got to find a certain amount of votes. What Trump was actually saying, if you read the call and you want to be honest about it, maybe the call was still improper. That's for you to decide. Trump said he believed there was a large number of votes and they only needed like 13,000. He didn't say, hey, get me 13,000 votes. He said, look at all of the possible votes. We only need 13,000. That's basically a legal, it's how the legal system works, right? So if you want to sue for voter fraud in, say, Pennsylvania, and you're arguing that 6,000 ballots you believe were filed wrong, signed wrong, improper, or just maybe fraudulent, you have to have standing. You have to be an injured party, which means what we saw a lot of in Pennsylvania was that people would file a lawsuit. The judge would say, you were not hurt by this, case dismissed. We won't even rule on this. And with the issue of Trump, they'd say, even if these 6,000 votes are improper, it won't change the results. No standing. And there you go. So if Donald Trump is saying we only need 13,000 votes for standing, which will change the results, he may be wrong about what's actually going on. But telling them, look, do the investigation, this is what we need, is not the same as saying fabricate them. You see what the game is? They're trying to act like Trump saying find the fraud. That they're lying about his quote. But now they're trying to imply that Trump was pressuring them to do so. He didn't use those exact words, but that's what he was doing. Donald Trump calling an investigator and saying, please investigate this, you're going to find some dirty stuff because he believes it, is not telling them to fabricate anything. The Washington Post says, in a time of much overblown chatter, blah, blah, I'm not going to read this stupid garbage. The call happened. It was an abuse of presidential authority. That's just not true. Donald Trump is allowed to call and ask for an investigation. Could you imagine if you worked at a bank and someone robbed the bank and you called the police and says, you need to investigate this. Oh, you shouldn't be involved in this because you're the person who stands to gain because you run the bank. I get it. Elections are different. But if you were in an election and you believed a crime was committed and you called an investigator and pled your case asking for an investigation, how is that wrong or an abuse of power? Here's where it gets funny. The Post's account of the call rested on one source, an individual familiar with the call who spoke on the condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity of the conversation. An individual familiar with the call. What does that mean, you scumbags? Nothing, apparently. That the source wasn't identified in the January 9th story. The Post didn't identify her in its follow-up based on the Wall Street Journal scoop. Quote, the Washington Post reported on the substance of Trump's December 23rd call in January, describing him saying that Watson should find the fraud and that she would be a national hero based on an account from Jordan Fuchs, the Deputy Secretary of State, whom Watson briefed on the comments. Mic drop. There it is. A guy on the phone with Trump told a staffer about what happened. The staffer said, here's what I was told happened. And without actually speaking or getting a comment from Watson, they decided this is confirmed. That's confirmation to you? Welcome to the mainstream media. This is how it operates. Political operatives and the press were so willing to smear the president, it's what you get. In an interview with the Eric Wemple blog, Fuchs said, I believe the story accurately reflected the investigators' interpretation of the call. And there it is. Accurately reflected the interpretation. So it wasn't even you. You had no idea what was going on. It was a game of telephone. Fuchs said the Post disclosed her role in the story with her permission and that she'd gotten the debriefing from the investigator, a direct report of hers, shortly after the call from Trump concluded. I think it's pretty absurd for anybody to suggest the president wasn't urging the investigator to find the fraud. These people have no shame. This, my friends, is what evil looks like. This is what evil looks like. The willingness to manipulate, lie, cheat, and steal. No honor, no integrity, a lust for power, and a willingness to steal and deprive and deceive. That, to me, is evil. They're so desperately now trying to defend their business instead of saying, we got this one wrong. We're sorry. They won't do it. No. Trump was absolutely trying to pressure this person to find fraud. Okay. Well, let's slow down a minute and talk about framing and manipulation. Was Trump saying, I believe there was fraud and I hope you find it, which is what you do when you call the police or the feds or any other investigator that has jurisdiction over a matter? Or was he saying find as in make up? I remember I tweeted something about Joe Biden and I said, Joe Biden will now find the votes he needs to win or something like that. I didn't say fabricate. I didn't say manifest. I said, there's a big stack of votes. They're going to go through them. Joe Biden will find what he needs in there. But many people use the word find to imply fabricated. That's the thing on the left, I suppose. Find, in my understanding, means you discover that something is already there. Like when you find a piece of gold buried in the ground, you didn't make it appear there. Someone didn't put it there. You dug a hole and it was there. Found, discovered, something that was already there. That's the game. Donald Trump was basically saying, even if he was saying find the fraud, even if that quote was true, they say he was illegally abusing his power and pressuring an investigator. And I'm just like, if you genuinely believe it and you ask someone to find it, how is that an abuse of power? They say the New York Times quickly matched the Post's reporting, including the inaccurate quotes. It added a correction on Monday. CNN has appended this editor's note to its story. An earlier version of this story on January 9th presented paraphrasing of the president's comments. That's right. Presented paraphrasing. They still claim the story is true, even though we now know they made the whole thing up. We asked the Post about claims that the newspaper's action amounted to a retraction. They said, we corrected the story published a separate news story last week at the top of our site and on our front page after we learned that our source had not been precise in relaying then President Trump's words. We are not retracting our January story because it conveyed the substance of Trump's attempt to influence the work of Georgia's election investigators. An opinion piece? That's all this is. All of it, an opinion. Their January 9th story accusing Trump wasn't fact. It was opinion. The opinion of this Jordan woman, the opinion of the investigator, not the fact. And they'll say it was a fact Trump pressured. No, that is an opinion. You want to know what the fact is? On a call, Donald Trump spoke with an elections investigator about a potential for fraud, and Donald Trump was requesting an investigation. That's a fact. Those things actually happened. But they look at Trump and they view him as the orange evil man. So they inject framing and opinion, and they'll say, well, it's obvious to everyone he was actually pressuring. You could headline the article, Donald Trump requests investigation into fraud. Donald Trump demands investigation of fraud. That is framing, and it's your opinion. In fact, the real fact would just be Donald Trump said, quote, find the fraud, and that would be it. However, that wasn't true either and wasn't even confirmed. This is the press, ladies and gentlemen. This is it. Now, here's how he ends. Wemple says that it did. Misreporting the words of the highest elected official in the land is a serious lapse and one that in this case seems so unnecessary. The existence of the call itself is a towering exclusive. When it comes to phone calls, the only good sources are the ones who are dialed in. That's true. So why did the Washington Post have no standards? He says the former president's partisans will attempt to memorialize the Post story as a fabrication or fake news, but a central fact remains. But it was fake news. Trump never said those things. Trump literally did not say the quote you published and claimed he did. That's fake news. You see the game they play? A central fact remains, he says, as the journal's recording attests, Trump behaved with all the crooked intent and suggestion that he brought to every other crisis of his presidency. That is not a fact. It's an opinion. I'm sick of the press. I got no problem telling you my opinions. Now, this Washington Post article is an opinion piece, but he's calling an opinion a fact. That's a lie. The fact is, Donald Trump had a phone call with an election official in Georgia discussing fraud, where Donald Trump expressed a desire for an investigation into Fulton County. That's it. The opinions. Okay, here's my opinion. Donald Trump desperately begged Georgia to enforce the law because of what he saw as very serious crimes being committed, and Georgia refused to do it. It's the same base issue, but your opinion can be whatever you want it to be. That's how the media lies, and it's the dirty game they play. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast, which is a different channel, and I will see you all there.